Hello from vlan Radio. Today we broadcast our first edition of On Air. In this broadcast we interview MQ artists in residence. The first artist we would like to welcome is Kristina Warren, a sound artist, composer and instrument builder based on Wampanoag and Narragansett land, also known as Providence. Hello, Kristina.
Hello, Johannes. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming. Do you want to tell us, for first question, our listeners, why it is important for you to mention in your biography which tribes settled the land on which you live?
Yeah, actually, I would say I'm the settler. I'm the one with the white Euro background, and so the Wampanoag and Narragansett were the original inhabitants and caretakers of the land. It's becoming a little more common in the US these days to do a land acknowledgement to say which indigenous peoples lived there before colonization, but that's really only the first small step. And so I hope to, in my life and in my music, to be responsible and to be connected and in right relationship with the people around me and the land, and so this is one small step toward that.
So it is an residence as well?
In some way, yeah. It always continues. It's always connected in that way. Yeah.
Great. I read in your biography or in the information you sent me that you build your own instruments.
Yeah.
How does it come?
Well, kind of slowly and gradually as a process, like many other parts of my work. I first got into the building and development side when I was doing voice and laptop work, and I was tired of moving on stage from the mic back and forth to the MIDI controller, and I thought, I need a controller right on the mic clip. So I put an Arduino and some control elements, toggles and buttons on there, and then so that was a digital controller, and then I got more into developing my own hardware digital synthesizers using integrated circuit chips, little 555 timers and 4048s and whatnot, and I really love that idea of kind of relationship between the person and the instrument. How do you approach the instrument? What is it giving you back? How does it affect your listening and the kinds of sounds you think to make or that can even occur to you in the first place? I find that so inspirational, and just these small little boxes can open up such a world of possibility and can be very different for you depending on your mood or the day you're approaching it. So it's it's quite interesting. There's a lot there, and of course building an instrument is different than receiving an instrument, picking up an existing instrument, and so it's just a really rich process, and that's something I've learned a lot from, I think.
Okay. I think it also can make you very happy to not just to create music, but also to create the instruments you're using in your music.
That's right. I haven't really developed new synths for a while, but I do it more in software these days, developing my own oscillators, and it does feel like this very ground level of relationship to the material, of kind of thinking about sound at the fundamental atomic level of the shape of the waveform. That's something really beautiful and full of potential, I think. Yeah. Nice.
So I guess that you're not building your own instruments, but you also use the instruments in your compositions, in your music you create.
I have, yeah.
Would you like to tell us what your setup looks like and how it changes over time?
Yeah, it changes a lot over time, depending on context and the nature of the piece and the space. For instance, in, around 2017, 18, 19, leading up to the pandemic, I was doing a lot with combining this controller Arduino type interface with the hardware synth, and I was using choreography and wearables. So I had some wearable synths that were actually strapped onto my limbs. And I had to kind of roll around on the floor to play them. And that was very, it was quite striking, I think, in a performative way. And then I had some others where the little box elements of the controller were spread out in a circle, and I had to kind of move among them and touch. So instead of having just a MIDI box on the table in front of you, I really had to move in this space just to touch this pad over here or that one over there. It really gave a lot as far as the kind of pace of performance, I would say. How much can I do at once? How long do I need to linger with a certain sound? So I found these wearable and choreographic instruments that I was using in sort of the late teens. If we can talk about that era. Yeah, really productive. These days my setup it's evolved. I've been on tour this spring. I'm mainly based in Vienna for the spring, but I've been around to different cities and different performances, and so I have a laptop, several MIDI controllers, Euro rack box, small setup, and so for my road setup I really think about portability, but in that case I'm designing my own oscillators within the software, so that's pretty easy to pack.
Do you mind to tell our listeners what kind of software you use for building your own oscillators?
Yeah, I use particularly Max MSP, and then of course I can use some Ableton, Max within that. There's a variety. I'll sometimes, if I want to do a kind of very mathematical approach, I have used the mathematics teaching software called GeoGebra to get a precise sort of line of best fit that precisely meets an image, or depending on how I'm sonifying. So it can be a more mathematical or a more kind of impressionistic approach that I take to this wave creation. That's been a lot of my work in Vienna for this spring is, my Tonspur project, which maybe we will discuss as well, but thinking about taking photos, videos, audio field recordings all around the city and outside the city, and then how can I sonify those into unique audio waveform shapes. And so I've been using that in my piece here at Museumsquartier, and again, kind of thinking about sound design at the fundamental level of the oscillator waveform shape.
Well, it's very interesting what you tell us. You told me before that you have played a concert yesterday, a multi-channel concert.
Yeah.
And if you talked about like oscillators and is there a certain trick you use that, for instance, if you told me you used 24 or 22 channels yesterday, that the certain frequencies are not interfering? Is there like a one-trick pony, a VST plugin that makes it happen, or is it really a mathematician you have to, or?
Yeah, I think my main trick is listening. Try to listen really, really precisely. And to a lesser extent, I do computational and calculation type work. I'm really thinking about resonance, overlap of distinct sounds that kind of pull out unique harmonics together, which you didn't really hear so much when they're separate and individual. For instance, in an 8-channel context, and I can talk about the Meerkanaal, the 24 or 25 in a moment, but thinking about mistletoe growing on trees, which I saw along the Donau, and then I used that as an inspiration for a pan position, kind of going left and right, up and down the length of the tree trunk, or the space, if you will. And then in the multi-channel space, it's complex, thinking about the resonance and how is it, what are the harmonic and even psychoacoustic features of the space. Maybe I can play a little bit of something to kind of demonstrate.
That would be
the
great,
resonance.
yes.
Yeah.
Want to play it right now?
Yeah, does that work?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
good. Let me fade, because
Yeah.
I'll probably...
Yeah, of course.
was an excerpt from my track Unikite Pool from my recent album New Suns, and that's fully from an ARP 2500's analog modular synthesizer. And so that's another way that I really think about resonance and the kind of productive interference of unique waveforms. Yeah.
Do you own this synthesizer, or?
Oh gosh, I wish. No. This is the one that Eliane Kadig is famous for using. The big, so they're like, I don't know, $50,000 to $80,000. It's way too much. I could never. But I used the one at Brown University where I used to teach, and so as a parting gift to myself, I made a bunch of recordings from the ARP and took 2 years to produce them and make the album out of these 10-ish hours of recordings, and
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, really nice. So you were a teacher at university?
I was.
What was your field at the university? Sound art?
Yeah, I think I was specifically multimedia and electronic music. Yeah, so this same kind of material and the kind of specialty classes that I taught were in an interesting contrast, Ableton on the digital side and then analog synthesis, of course, on the analog side. So get this balance of both. Yeah.
Really nice. Would have loved to have such nice courses at university.
Yeah. Yeah. It was wonderful to interact with the students on these topics. Yeah,
I believe it. So you quit working at university, and now you're
that's right,
full-time
focusing
sound
on
artist.
Sound art, particularly performance, and moving more into installation as well. I'm really fascinated with that kind of sonic moment, and of course the unique spaces. I mean, to me, everything is really site-specific. I understand that's a particular practice, but always thinking in a very particular way about the space and the time and the moment. Yeah.
So, have you heard about Tonspur? For our listeners, Tonspur is a passage at the Museumsquartier in Vienna, where there are like sound sculptures shown in a regular. I think it's changed monthly by sound.
1 to 2 months, yeah.
1 to 2 months, and Kristina just made one of that. So, have you found Tonspur first, and then saw that there's an artist in residence program at the Museumsquartier as well? Or how was the process?
Yeah, the other way. So I am here finishing up a Fulbright U.S. Scholar program, which more specifically is a artist in residence at the Museumsquartier here. So Fulbright program is through the U.S. government, actually, and the U.S. Scholar program is mostly for professors, all disciplines, who go abroad to teach 1 or 2 semesters. My program is unique, and I'm one of 3 artists who are finishing up our spring here because it's an artist residency. There's no teaching component. It's all at the Museumsquartier here. They give us a studio. It's really lovely. And so as part of the application, they encourage you to make connections with Vienna and local people and groups. And so I found this wonderful organization, Tonspur Kunstverein Wien, and so headed by Georg Weckwerth and Peter Sely, and also great work done by Martha Beauchamp. And so they have been just wonderful in hosting me and in facilitating this 8-channel installation piece I have now in the Tonspur Passage here in the Museumsquartier. Yeah.
Great. What was the process in composing this can I tell a piece?
Of course, yeah. Well, for me, composing and improvising are very related. For this, I knew it would be an installation, so this kind of fixed quality, and it repeats. It's a 30 minutes and it loops. So I wanted it, even though it's quite fixed, to have a very live feeling. So I did a bunch of sort of one-shot recordings in my studio, or performances, if you will, and picked my favorite. And that was the material I worked from, and then I spatialized that into the 8 channels. So I hope it has this kind of very mobile, nice flow to it. If someone who went this morning and listened to the whole 30 minutes said it didn't feel like 30 minutes at all, which feels nice. It feels like a compliment.
Absolutely. I heard some of the pieces before, only excerpts. And I just thought that I heard like recordings of violin. Is it have you recorded violin, or is it just an imitation with a plugin, with a VST plugin? Or
no, I recorded. Yeah. I have my bank of sounds is largely samples that I have made myself, a whole variety of things. There are some piano samples. You got the violin sounds. Yeah, you heard those, some little kind of staccato ricochet bits. A lot of little clicky sounds, like, I don't know if this is like that. I'm tapping the little strings of my sweatshirt together. As well as some of the analog recordings. So I think of my style in a gentle noise is one term, or ASMR drone is the other term. So drone, you get the long tones, and then the ASMR, all the clickies. If you don't know ASMR, it's, I think, auto-sensory motor response or something, and it's usually on YouTube. There are a million videos, and it's usually people really close in the mic. Some people have this kind of tingly feeling if they hear those. I don't have the tingles, but I just really like the small clicks and the little bits, and I love the contrast between these little clicks and the longer tones. I think it creates a unique kind of spacious feeling and form of listening, and actually maybe it would be nice to hear an example of that. Can I play some
please,
now?
of course.
Good.
Sure.
Okay. So that was an excerpt of my piece Lavender Lauds, which is on now at the Museumskwartier, and I think there you can really hear this balance of all kinds of textures and this kind of organic feeling of sort of flowing forward. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. I just talked about it. The balance of the clicky sounds and the drone-esque. Was really nice to hear inside. You told me just right before it was an improvisation.
Yeah.
So how did you improv? Can you tell us about what have you used, or what was the process in creating this improvisation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say first of all that it's really kind of getting myself in the right headspace, for lack of a better word. I had tried to record this for a few days and I just wasn't getting anything good, and then I came from a coffee with a friend and I was just in the perfect mood. We had a nice talk, and so I get all my materials set up, which is laptop and a few MIDI controllers and Eurorack box, and I just kind of go. It feels like kind of jumping in the flow of a river or something. And I don't know, I felt like I don't know if I would say kind of bottling lightning, but just the idea of sort of being present and kind of coaxing everything into the right relationships. And this iteration, I think, is also really important, and not grasping too tightly to the ones that don't work. Just waiting, hoping I get a good take later on.
I can understand. Yeah, sure. Of course. Has this process changed over your time? Over time?
Yeah, I used to be more. I mean, I started in acoustic composition, and I used to have a more traditional process of kind of perhaps sitting at a piano. Usually pen and paper. And notation software later, but kind of, composing everything out for the different instruments. And it felt more out of time. I would kind of do everything piece by piece and then eventually end up with a finished product. And over the years and through different collaborations and performance projects, I've really deepened my relationship with improvisation. And to me, that is really meaningful. And I'm really deeply inspired by Paulina Oliveros' work. And she had, of course, many great things to say about interplays between composition and improvisation. And so for me, I think this improvised moment of music making in the home studio, for instance, is a form of composing for me personally, because I still am sitting with the material and developing and observing what does and doesn't work, but kind of taking more time with it, and kind of, to me, it feels like a more natural or organic way of letting the process play out than this kind of piecemeal compositional approach I used to take.
Right now, do you work on something special, or is it just like more improvisations and you just keep up doing what you're doing, and like in a certain amount of time you will decide, okay, now is the time to release some of this ideas, or are you working like on an album or like on an EP, for instance, like in this commercial music type of way? Or
I don't think I do commercial music at all. I just don't think, I mean, I'm not against it, I just don't think I fit with that. I would love to do, so I have recently, the first thing we heard today was from my most recent album release, New Suns, and that, took me 2 years to put everything together, so I'm kind of taking a breath after that, performing some of that material and really seeing how that can kind of go forward in the world. And continuing to develop my materials, like what we just heard, the Lavender Lauds, that kind of stuff, how that might live in performance or installation. One idea I'm toying with, and this is probably not nearer than 3 years out. It's still, it's a little while out. is a piano album of some kind. Several of the gigs I did here were with piano and electronics, including with a new collaborator friend, Pia Palme. And I studied some piano as a child, and at university, I'm not really a fantastic player, but I really, again, this relationship with the instrument that really does a different thing for me, for my brain and for my personality than working with electronics. They're both kind of complementary aspects of creativity for me. So I don't know what form that would take, if it would be purely acoustic piano album or some kind of electronic processing, but that's something I have my eye on for the next, let's say, my 10-year plan.
It's a lovely plan for 10 years.
Yeah.
So can you use do you have a piano in your home studio, or do you use it at university, or?
I don't have a piano at home. I would love to. I would probably need a residency with a piano, or university access. There is something different, though, isn't there, about making music at home versus going to a place? And I mean, both have their pros and cons, but I think in some way my music is becoming more intimate. I mean, it's still quite spacious, and you use the word mysterious, and there is that, but I think particularly with the close presence of the clicks and the kind of special feeling of the resonance, there's something that's very kind of close and present and intimate about it. And so to me that kind of implies a home studio way of working, or a residency where I have a piano very near me and I'm not always commuting to a different space or something. But yeah, I don't know, I need to see what the future may bring. Yeah.
Have you ever worked with field recordings? Like recording beside the clicks, for instance, but like a field with flowers and little animals and insects and wind, for instance. Or is it something you're not using?
A little bit. I have a little bit. Yeah, I think of course bird song is something that's really appealing, and a lot of composers and sound artists do. Of course, it's so melodic, and the different rhythms in particular to me are really fascinating. I think I tend to prefer recordings that are more monophonic. A field recording like that, like you're talking about, is to me almost sensory overload in a good way, but that's almost a full piece itself. It's so polyphonic, so much going on. So I think, I'm very careful about how I do that. On the other hand, in Lavender Lodge, there's a recording of a protest chant. Early in my time here in Vienna, I heard the one that goes, Hoch die internationale Solidarität. Yeah. And so that is really sped up. And so, I was just talking with someone about this. It's, depending on the context in this kind of oscillator processing, you can really remove a lot of that rich context and soundscape of it, and how to deal with that. So I think, I try to be careful about sort of how much sonic information I present at a time.
Yeah, I can completely understand it, because as we talked during your song, if you have this balance between the drone-esque stuff and the clicky sounds, it's really hard to put another level of field recording inside.
Right.
Which can be overwhelming, and it can distress, and what have you seen in Vienna besides work you did all the time? Have you did some sightseeing, or have you been to I don't know, to concert, for instance?
Oh yeah. I've attended a lot of concerts and done some sightseeing. In my first few weeks, let me tell you about sightseeing. In my first few weeks here was when I did the most touristy kind of stuff. I think I made it to about half of the Bezirke, not bad. My favorite, I will certainly say my favorite view of Vienna was from Mainzer Tiergarten, the Wiener Blick, that just, breathtaking to see the whole city. It just felt really special. I did not expect it to be that hilly, but it was worth it. Yeah, and I've done, you know, the touristy things. I've done the Riesenrad. I've done the, what else? Yeah, just, and a ton of walking as well. I love to see the city by foot. So that's the more touristy aspect. Oh, I had a show in Bratislava, and I took the bus there, but I took the boat back.
Ah, nice.
Just right up the Danube. Really,
Great.
really nice.
I've never did it before, but I should do it.
I highly recommend it.
Yes.
It was a high-speed cruise. It really blasted right up the Donau. It was great. It was really lovely. Yeah, that's where I saw the mistletoe and got inspired about the panning oscillator. And you asked me about concerts as well. Well, I've seen, some lovely ones. I mean, I don't know. Are you thinking about specific venues? Or, yeah, I have seen, I would say, echoraum is probably my favorite venue in town. I love it. I've seen some really wonderful stuff at Fluke, Celeste, Kunstbetrieb. Oh gosh, there's too many to name. I love the sound scene here. Just really very active and bubbling, and just feels like a whole lot of different things are going on in a really kind of lovely polyphonic way. I really appreciate that. Which is part of why I was so excited about this project. Oh, pop-up radio and MQ? That's wonderful. That's amazing.
Nice. Have you ever thought about moving from the States to Europe?
Oh, all the time, increasingly. Yeah, I think it's kind of tricky with, the Austrian regulations, but it does feel different here, the landscape of what it means to have an artistic career in the US versus, well, I can't speak for all of Europe, but in Vienna, for instance. And I've kind of been asking a lot of people their experiences. Some are from Austria, some are from elsewhere in Europe, EU or other. And of course, everyone has different experiences, but I mean, to me as a general rule, it just feels like there's a little more support for artists here, and just more of a culture of it. So I don't know. I certainly want to come back for short visits, and for longer, I have to kind of work on that and see if it's possible.
Shall we listen to one more pieces of yours?
Yeah. Let me see. I'm thinking what might be nice. I guess we listen to, maybe to tie in that practice of composition. I'm thinking of playing an electric guitar quartet, actually. This is interesting. It's called Pogpo, which means waterfall in Korean. I was really inspired by pansori, which is a traditional Korean music style. Usually there's a vocalist and a percussionist, and the works of pansori are these long opera-length, kind of epic folk stories, but, often they're performed excerpted. But the waterfall connection is pansori voice. A really good pansori voice is quite rough, and traditionally they would go, aspiring singers would go and kind of abandon their life and live in nature next to a waterfall and scream into the waterfall to callous their vocal folds and develop that rough tone. So, I mean, thinking about the culture, this is not mine. I call it pansori fan fiction. It's just my kind of ode to it. But also about the layering, I thought about what if each guitar is almost like a pansori voice. And so they're stacked, and you can hear some of the bending. It's kind of interesting what happens when an electric guitar imitates a vocal timbre.
Yes.
You can hear the bending and the kind of almost conversational relationships between them.
I'm looking forward to
So let's give it a listen,
yes,
shall we? Yeah. good ending, right? They did a great job. That was Pog Pope, my composition from 2012, performed by the excellent guitar quartet Dither. Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. That's you do hear the kind of layering and maybe some of the vocal inspiration in that. To kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's how my work has evolved and how I see it continuing to progress is thinking more about the relationship of improvisation within composition. And particularly in collaborations, like I've had some this spring, thinking about what these live musical moments can bring to the creative process, is kind of spontaneity. And I want to tie this in. I'm thinking of how to say this because the one last piece I'd like to play before we go today is thinking about tradition. So as much as I am interested in spontaneity and this real-time music making and sound making moment, I'm also increasingly interested in tradition, and for me tradition is really a living thing, but thinking about how we carry things forward. In my recent ARP 2500 album release, New Suns, the last track, Slip Jigs, is thinking about the particular kind of Irish tune and dance called Slip Jigs, which is usually a 9/8 meter, and it's usually fast and graceful and light. And I kind of got to imagining, well, what if I could sort of recreate that on an analog synthesizer in some way? I mean, what does that mean to take a, old tradition, but of course it's been kind of reimagined and repurposed over the years, and then completely recast it on this different instrument? Can we call the ARP an instrument? I think so, or a system, or what's the interface? And then what does it mean to do traditional music on that? Is it traditional? Yeah, I don't know. So I think about that in terms of kind of moving forward, or at least kind of expressing where we are now and where we might be headed. I don't know. I think my music is really quite abstract, and I don't intend to be didactic or kind of overly preachy with any message, but I do have a particular vantage point, maybe, just kind of a direction I'm looking in, if not a particular message I'm putting out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. For me, it makes sense. It sounds for me like you're trying to translate something.
Yeah.
With this
yes.
This tradition, using this synthesizer and translate it, but I'm not sure for whom, or for maybe just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I mean, I really think that collective listening is precious and political. And so when we listen all together, some people like my work, some people don't, and that's all fine. But what's more important even is the kind of polis aspect, all of us putting our attention together on this thing, whether my work or somebody else's work. I mean, to me, that's so powerful. And we all come with different perspectives, of course, but I think to kind of unite in thinking about how are we dealing with this direction of moving forward, I think that's extremely powerful in the kind of deepest political sense, not of kind of elected governments and whatnot, but the community sense of political.
The time moved forward as well.
Yes.
The 50 minutes just flew, and I have to thank you for everything you brought with you, your person, your inspiration, your music. We will put everything, all links in the description of the YouTube video, and of course we will put it on SoundCloud as well. Thank you everyone for listening. Maybe you come back next time. Okay, Kristina, thanks again, and let's have a listen.
Thank you,
Thank
Johannes.
you.